Good morning, everyone. We'll just give it one more minute as people are coming in from the waiting room, okay? Okay, good morning, everyone. We're so excited to have you here. I think a few more folks are still joining. We love to see the engagement. We're at, let's see, there's about 90 of you. We might make it to 100 this morning. Welcome. My name's Lynanne Gutierrez. I'm the president and CEO at Groundwork Ohio. Our team's really excited to share with you what's been really a year's worth of work in the making and unveil our policy agenda with you alongside a report release here today. If you are new to us, Groundwork Ohio is the nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy research and advocacy organization uniquely focused on the first 5 years of life, that prenatal period to age 5, that lays a strong foundation for Ohio kids and families. We are the state early childhood advocates, and we're so glad to have so many of you at our table today and moving forward. A few housekeeping notes that today's webinar is being recorded. Closed captioning is available. You can look at the top of your Zoom screen if you need to access that. All participants are muted. Please use the Q&A function for questions. And we have a full agenda, so if we can't get to your specific question during the Q&A segment, we will follow up if you provide your email address with the question. And all participants are going to receive a recording after the webinar along with materials shared via email once the event is concluded. Thank you. All right, so a quick agenda overview. I'm going to just provide some opening remarks to the work that we're sharing today, and then you'll hear from Vice President Brittany Bolton around our policy agenda overview and really what the Roadshow Listening Tour was, which was a substantial part of collecting input to create our policy agenda. You'll hear from our policy director, Caitlin Feldman, around our key policy priorities. And finally, back to Brittany and a couple of our other team members on how to really engage with us in the future as we build out this next chapter of groundwork and next chapter of progress for early childhood policy in the state. So just a little bit of background. Our team here is really proud of our policy framework and our policy process, and we've been trying to build more transparency, accountability, and engagement around how we create our policy agenda. So I just wanted to walk through what that process looks like for the organization. So our policy framework is data-driven, and so that is why on the far left side of the slide, you see that we're really focused on those factors that the evidence tells us that build a strong foundation for very young children. In recognition that 90% of brain development happens in the first 5 years of life, we know that if we can invest during that unique period of brain development in early learning and childcare, healthcare access and quality, early childhood trauma prevention, and economic stability for families, if we can get that right, we can build a strong foundation for young children in all of the environments in which they live and grow. Those investments and high quality interventions in those spaces lead to positive outcomes for young children in Ohio. They're more likely to be healthy and ready to learn. So those outcomes are what we're looking towards as indicators if we're doing the right things there in those first 5 years. And all of those investments lead to advancing our vision, which is that Ohio is the best place to be a young child, and every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential. So if what I just shared with you is really what we focus on, then how do we create our policy agenda? How do we operationalize that? When it comes to how we determine policies, we have a robust and adaptable process that's laid out for you in this graphic. And really where we spent most of our year even though that we are always seeking input, we spent a lot of our time this year seeking input from key stakeholders, being in community with you all on the ground in your local community, talking with advocates and experts from families to community leaders to policymakers themselves to really identify and inventory where are the challenges and where are the opportunities and where do we have shared challenges and opportunities across the state that with state policy and state investment, we can really eliminate barriers and then scale those innovations that so many of your communities are coming up with. Next, we have surveyed our full network. So we did that in the late fall here as a final opportunity to provide feedback after doing a 13-stop roadshow, after working deeply with our early childhood advisory councils and a number of different interest groups that we work with throughout the year, many individual meetings, many larger group meetings to really, again, get all of that information and provide us a summary or a sample policy agenda for then the full network to respond to. We next evaluate opportunities identified by our key stakeholder groups and really utilize all of the expertise at our disposal in recognition of the political opportunities, our political landscape and environment, where we see opportunities to make progress, where we think there's going to be some longer term goals that need to be implemented over a longer term strategy, and ultimately develop and amplify a policy agenda in consideration of all that expertise on top of what we learned from you all. We have now developed the policy agenda, which we're finally releasing today, and it's now upon us to really amplify what this policy agenda is and implement it in this, with the first opportunity being yet in this remainder of the state General Assembly during the lame duck period of time. And then in the new General Assembly, which will begin in 2025, alongside the release of the governor's executive budget, and we'll be working with you all to implement the policy agenda and get the best outcomes for kids we possibly can in the state's biennial budget process, which begins in February and will end in July. So just a couple other calendar reminders. We are now in the quarter 4 of 2024, but this is just really summarizing where we've been in the community with you all developing our policy agenda, listening, and now we're elevating and externalizing our policy agenda to you, to the press, to policymakers, and beginning to implement it in 2025. Again, mobilizing you all around our shared priorities that we've worked on together and implementing those throughout the state budget process. We will see the governor's executive budget in February. The budget will then move first to the House, where they'll be the House members will deliberate on the budget and put their unique footprint on what they think state policies, priorities, and investments should be. And then it'll move to the Ohio Senate. They will go through the very same process. And by June, we'll have conference committee where the Senate and the House and then the governor's executive version of the budget really need to be reconciled. And by July 1, we will have a new budget implementing state investments and hopefully have some great outcomes for kids. So we didn't want to bury the lead here as we were doing two things on this webinar. We're releasing our report, Driving Change. It really summarizes the entirety of the process we've been through, and we'll share some highlights of that throughout our time together today. But what's most important for you all to know, to become familiar with as you see yourself in the work in our full policy agenda is really what our policy agenda is and where our priorities are. So I know our team will put a link to our Driving Change report so you can begin to become familiar with that. Because this is the document that we're going to continue to return to, our policy agenda, to remind ourselves of our shared objectives as we move forward over the next couple of years. In terms of our priorities going into the state budget, we have four of those. And so let's talk a little bit about them. First is focused on childcare. We want to increase eligibility for publicly funded childcare to at least 200% of the federal poverty level and increase access to full-time public preschool slots that are comparable to full-time publicly funded childcare subsidies to ensure that young children are ready for kindergarten and working families are supported. So this is really focused on increasing access, getting more children into quality learning environments that need it. We know there's a high demand for these opportunities for our low-income working families, and that we're not reaching enough low-income working families and those children to both support their parents going to work and their child being in a quality learning environment that will set them up for lifelong success. Our second policy agenda priority is also in that childcare space, in recognition that in order to support increased access, we also have to improve upon payment practices that better support childcare programs' ability to deliver those quality learning, deliver quality learning and create those quality learning environments. In order to be able to make increases in teacher pay and get actually closer to the cost of quality care while not overburdening families, we're recommending increasing publicly funded childcare rates to the 75th percentile of the 2024 market rate survey. So moving up what we reimburse providers for serving young children who have access to the subsidy is that next benchmark we're looking for. Additionally, we believe that paying programs based on enrollment versus attendance, which was what happens in the private market, will also provide a lot of revenue sustainability or revenue reliability for our programs to be able to provide that consistent care and plan their business around the needs of their families. And finally, in recognition that we don't want to overburden families as we make these changes, we want to limit family co-pays to 7% of a family's income. Our third and fourth policy priorities are focused in the maternal and young child health space. So the first is in recognition of the state's infant mortality crisis. We really think it's important to invest in local infant mortality collaborative models with state dollars at an increased level in those communities with high rates of infant mortality and high rates of racial disparities in infant mortality that require these collaborative models that require health system managed care plans, impacted communities, and Black moms specifically to co-create and implement plans of action to reduce infant and maternal mortality. We've seen some great success across the state. Every community is working forward a little bit differently, but those components of listening to community and engaging health systems, including hospitals, are going to be key to making progress. And we have seen indications of that progress and what's possible through the work that Cradle Cincinnati has done, and so many of our other infant mortality collaboratives are working towards. Finally, in the maternal and young child health space, our final priority for this year's budget is to continue delivering on the expansion of access to evidence-based home visiting programs. So those are programs like Nurse Family Partnership, Healthy Families America, and Parents as Teachers, where there's state level investment. It also includes the scaling of Family Connects statewide. So the Family Connects was piloted this past year. We are trying to reach more very young families, young parents and their children, both in the prenatal period of time and as their infants and toddlers, to really serve them, make sure their needs are met, and provide a caring network of support for new moms and new parents. We also, in doing so, in order to expand, want to make sure that we utilize Medicaid to leverage access and impact to those home visiting programs that support the healthy development of Ohio's youngest children, and also drive reductions in child abuse and neglect. So thank you for listening to those top priorities that we'll be really focused on during the state budget period of time. I am now going to hand it over to our Vice President, Brittany Bolton, to share with you kind of how we came to get here, a little more about our process and what we learned from you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lynanne, and good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to share some takeaways from our time on the road this summer. Having joined Groundwork earlier this year, it was really just an absolute privilege and delight for me to be able to travel the state and meet so many folks on this call and beyond. So if you don't mind indulging us, I'm going to start by sharing the unveiling of a really brief 3-minute video that recaps our travels this summer and our stakeholder engagement process, and you might even see yourself reflected in there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this slide to our Roadshow recap video.
Groundwork Ohio went on the road. We made 13 stops all across Ohio. You shared what you need for your family, your children, and Ohio to thrive.
When a family has to pay 30% of their income to get high quality care, the system is broken.
Our infant waiting list is probably 150.
We've identified, I believe it's about 2,000 child care spots that we are short.
This is a profession. It should be compensated that way.
We are the workforce behind the workforce.
You have parents that are barely surviving, but they still don't qualify for services.
The wage that they're being paid is just covering child care.
15 of the top 20 employers in our county have shifts that either start before 6:30 or end after 6 p.m.
If we want to continue to have a quality workforce, we have to have quality childcare.
It's an economic issue. We need more investment in early care and education.
There are huge early childhood mental health needs.
Policymakers did a really good job giving funding to substance abuse treatment centers, but I don't think that we pay enough attention to the children of those people.
We're seeing a lot more kids coming to us with trauma.
We found that by the time kids enter middle school, 20% of them self-report 6 or more adverse childhood experiences.
So it's at least 30 minutes to an hour from Fayette County to be able to see your OB and have your child.
We fund K-12 at $7,000 per child, but we don't have that same funding at all for 0 to 5.
10% of my enrollment was homeless at some point in the school year.
Housing insecurity is such a prevalent problem. It sets all of our other services up to fail.
A lot of people are paying in rent what they could pay for in a mortgage.
We should be looking at opportunities to create new pathways to home ownership.
Shelby County government cannot solve this problem on our own.
When we have an opportunity to invest in evidence-based programming, it is a no-brainer.
We have the research, we have the data.
This is our moment. It is not the time for scared leadership.
If the kids are not okay, Ohio's not going to be okay.
Join us to make Ohio the best place to be a young child.
Thanks so much for watching that with us. I love seeing that recap from really April through July that we were on the road together as a team. And you'll note some of the key policy takeaways that Lynn shared earlier are reflected in a lot of the comments from our speakers and from our attendees during that video. And we'll share a little bit more about that engagement process here momentarily. Our report that was shared in the chat, I just wanted to share a brief synopsis. We've got the full public policy agenda, which you can do a deeper read on at your leisure in there, as well as these community spreads about each community we visited, so both urban and rural alike. So wanted to share that each of these are different, but there are some guiding structures to each of them that hopefully will help make things a little easier for you to read and take away. So in each community spread, you'll see key takeaways from the panels, from the data walk that we did with participants, and from our lunch engagement sections. You will see fast facts about every county that we visited there on that bottom left corner. And those fall in line with our 4 public policy domains that we shared earlier this morning. So this is from our time in Portsmouth. And going up north a little bit, just a little preview of our time in Dayton. We also, on each of our community spreads, will list all of the speakers that engaged with us that day, some of our favorite photos, and some notable statements that we pulled from transcripts. Every single event was transcribed, and our staff poured over those to really bring out some of the key themes and takeaways throughout the report as well. And a little thank you for each of our hosts at each site. We had so many wonderful folks offered to comp space for us and really help us find locations that were really accessible for members across diverse communities. A little bit more about how we engaged each of these the participants at the various roadshows. So obviously we had panels at each of the events. We had over 100 panelists across the 14 events we did in 13 communities around the state. We had over 20 panels and programs. Our team and moderators that came in asked a number of questions, and all the Groundwork staff took various notes in addition to recording and transcribing. We touched 55 counties around the state and had 1,500 registrants across the series. Our team, just a quick fun fact, drove over 2,400 miles and collected 869 Post-it notes from our data walk, which if you attended one of our events, there was a data walk that had a board for each of our public policy pillars that folks, anyone attending the event could take part in offering policy solutions and problems that they see in those domains. In addition to the data walk and the panel and Q&A section, we also had an online survey for folks who couldn't be in the room or who had thoughts after the event. We had nearly 200 survey respondents to the online survey. And in addition to that, we had a specific survey for family care providers in Cincinnati because we heard there were scheduling conflicts for them to get in the room. So we had questions there were 30 women that filled out those questions as well. And really, this impact from the community's voice was just absolutely critical. We can't underscore how important it was to get all of these various inputs in creating our public policy agenda. So we've shared the public policy agenda, but these are kind of more thematic notes that we took from across the 14 events in the 13 communities that we visited. Across the board, we see shared challenges, things like access to housing, access to care, childcare, access to healthcare services, things that popped up across diverse communities that were similar and challenged in nature, but a unified vision. So despite differences, there are visions shared across the board of a brighter future for our young children and families. We saw so many signs of local advocacy power growing, infrastructure in a number of communities of local folks banding together and strengthening their advocacy voice through local collective impact models. We saw gaps in equitable access across a number of different service areas, right? Whether it's mental health, behavioral health, physical health, care, powers of local innovation, folks not just banding together for advocacy, but developing unique solutions, whether it's partnering in a public-private partnership process or bringing certain types of services into different locations to make it easier for parents, one-stop shop to access services. There were so many stories that were specific to unique teachers, unique family members, unique patients. There was a huge emphasis on humanizing these data and numbers that we see and that our team loves to collect and share in our advocacy work, but really bringing faces and families to those numbers was absolutely a theme across the board. And a part of that was elevating family voices. And that's something that our team is really committed to, having caregiver voices be at the table when we're having conversations about what public policy agenda creation looks like. Cross-sector collaboration is another big theme that emerged. So we know that government alone cannot solve the childcare crisis. We know that business alone cannot solve it. We know that the healthcare system alone cannot solve the infant mortality crisis, but all of these different sectors working together to tackle these big systemic changes is a must. And finally, on a hopeful note, I think our team, as well as many of our partners, do feel humbled by the very serious challenges faced across Ohio's communities, but also this hope for change is absolutely critical for us to continue in this work. So that was something that we took away from every visit. I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Caitlin Feldman, who will cover a little bit more about our public policy agenda priorities. But again, there's an even greater level of detail in the report, and we really invite you to visit that. But I'll turn it over now to Caitlin. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you, Brittany, and hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Feldman, and it's my privilege to serve as Policy Director here with Groundwork Ohio. And as the leader of our maternal and young child health work, I collaborated with our stakeholders to compile our key policy priorities in this body of work. Our top 3 areas of focus for maternal and young child health include improving health outcomes for moms and babies, expanding access to mental and behavioral health services for parents and young children, and expanding access to critical resources that improve the health of mothers and babies. With input from our stakeholders, we identified key programs, services, and infrastructure supports that we believe can move the needle toward these 3 goals. In the interest of time, as Brittany mentioned, I will not dive too deeply into each of these categories today, but there are additional objectives associated with each of these key areas that I highly recommend you visit our Driving Change report to see more information and a greater level of detail about those objectives to advance these key priority areas. And if you don't mind advancing to the next slide, I would love to go over some of the key policy priorities for our early learning work as well. Similarly, we have 3 primary categories in this policy agenda, including increased access to affordable quality childcare, support for quality early learning experiences that prepare children for kindergarten, and effective support for early childhood educators to meet the ever-growing needs of children. Much like our maternal and young child health policy agenda setting process, the Early Learning Advisory Council members were truly invaluable in elevating the needs of early learning and childcare programs and systems. Through a process of cyclical feedback and engagement, the Early Learning Advisory Council helped to shape our policy agenda with key priorities and corresponding objectives. So our full policy agenda, including both the maternal and young child health and early learning priorities, were both fueled by feedback from their respective advisory councils here with Groundwork, and were strongly influenced and driven by our roadshow events that Brittany did such a beautiful job recapping. Over the course of that period of time, we had ample opportunities to hear from individuals across the state, and that was deeply valuable to our agenda setting process as we were identifying those key areas of focus. Again, for more information about this full process, please review our Driving Change report to view the policy agenda therein, as well as a full comprehensive overview of how we got to where we are. I'll pass this presentation back to Brittany Bolton to continue. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. Really appreciate that overview of our maternal and young child health and early learning agendas, respectively. I am so excited now to introduce the newest groundworker, not the newest in tenure because it's her second time on staff. Vanessa Butler is our new Senior Director of Community Engagement and Special Projects, and I'm going to pass it over to Vanessa to talk a little bit more about her work and how you can engage with her. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks so much, Brittany. Groundwork, we recognize that the early childhood movement touches so many aspects of society, and it calls on us to rely on engaging a broad range of audiences that can drive systemic change. So if we're thinking from business leaders to women-serving organizations, community-based organizations to policymakers, we thrive on connecting people and organizations across the state to mobilize uniquely a unique audience of diverse stakeholders who share an early child policy as a priority. So we look forward in this next chapter of our journey to tap into a women's audience. We know that unaffordable, inaccessible childcare in Ohio is holding back women and young children, and the childcare crisis is a women's economic prosperity crisis. So for our women's audience, we will be hosting quarterly calls for individuals to share their own experiences, share expertise, all the while unifying everyone with a combined voice and build the necessary momentum to raise the urgency of this issue statewide. Additionally, we look forward to partnering collaboratively through polling, coalition building, media campaigns to increase the visibility of this dire crisis and the impact on our communities across Ohio. So please feel free, as you can see on the screen on our website, there's a Join Our Coalition, and I look forward to joining each and every one of you in this important work in the near future. I will now pass it back to Brittany.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And I can't encourage you enough to reach out to Vanessa if you haven't had a chance to meet her yet. We are so excited to have her working with our business leaders around the state, helping us find more champions among our local elected officials and really leading that women's workforce work. So thanks for being here, Vanessa. I'll pass it over now to our second newest groundworker, our Managing Director of Communications, Sarah Loken, who is going to talk with everyone about action alerts. Hi, Sarah.
Thanks, Brittany. Hi, everyone. Thanks to so many of you for joining us this morning. We ended up with over 120 people on the call, so we're really glad you're here. So all these policy priorities that we've been talking about, the most important part of this conversation is how can we all work together to advance this shared agenda. And so one of the ways that you can be actively engaged in us is to engage with our action alerts. Groundwork uses action alerts to activate audience engagement directly with legislators. So there's a handful of reasons why we do this. We really want to empower voices for change. So by keeping you updated on key policy decisions, we're trying to ensure that your voice can be amplified at the right time, which creates a larger impact. We want to ensure that policymakers hear real-life perspectives, which you hold. We want to advance equity through collective action. Policy change is a long process, but collective action accelerates it. So when we mobilize our audience through action alerts, we demonstrate to policymakers that there is a broad and passionate support for addressing inequities that affect children in our state. We want to show lawmakers that early childhood is a priority. By sending messages to legislators, you help underscore that early childhood development and family support are pressing priorities for Ohioans. We want to create accountability and transparency, and this can be done by holding lawmakers accountable. Action alerts enable you to directly communicate your expectations and encourage policymakers to align their actions with the needs of their communities. And finally, we want to strengthen community involvement in policy decisions. Action alerts make it easy for busy people to stay involved and act quickly on issues they care about. By providing timely information and suggested actions, we are working to build a bridge between constituents and lawmakers, helping ensure that community voices are part of shaping policy decisions. So I'm going to show you how easy this is. You should be subscribed to receive our emails. If you are not subscribed and you were invited in a different method to join today's webinar, I do encourage you to go to our website and subscribe to our emails. When you do that, you at a pivotal time will receive an email from us that has the title Action Alert in the subject line. It will explain what is going on and how you can help by contacting policymakers in your district. This one from September is about protecting and prioritizing childcare and spending bills. So if you got this email from us, you would just click at the bottom on Take Action Now. Next slide. Clicking that button takes you to a web page that recaps what was in the email, and you can scroll down until you see a form. This form asks for your name, your address, your email, and your phone number, and that's it. And after you've done this once, this information will populate automatically next time. So this platform is about to send a message to policymakers for you. It's ready to go. This is an automated system. We've already given you a subject line and written a message for you. You have a chance on this screen to personalize the subject line or the message however you'd like. So you can add in some language about where you work and describe some of the examples of real life scenarios that you see every day in your work. You can cite your own experiences as a parent, or you can leave this as is and just click next. And that is how quick and easy it is. So once you hit next, your message is automatically sent to policymakers in your district based on the address that you entered. So my message was just sent to Senator Sherrod Brown, Senator J.D. Vance, and Representative Mike Carey, asking them to prioritize Senate increases for child care as they negotiate spending bills. So this action alert is still active and open right now. You can join this very action alert by going to groundworkohio.org, click on Get Involved, and then Act Now. This action alert to save childcare is featured there. You saw how quick and easy it is. So I hope that you will join us and take action next time we sound the alarm and send you an action alert. Thank you. Brittany?
Thanks so much, Sarah. You do make it look so easy, and having filled out many of these myself, I can attest that the process is seamless, and I love that it auto-populates. So thanks for doing a run through with us. I'm going to chat a little bit about another engagement opportunity that is more State House in the flesh focused, although you can submit written testimony. In the budget cycle, there will be many opportunities to testify about the budget bill in both chambers. So these are actually both pictures of the Senate hearing rooms, the Finance Committee hearing room and the North hearing room. And I believe our colleague Troy Hunter, our Senior Director of Policy, is actually in the North hearing room right now giving testimony on Senate Bill 273, which is a child care cred bill sponsored by Senator Michelle Reynolds from the Columbus area. So this is something our team is really happy to help folks prepare for. I'll note that the full finance, as well as the many finance subcommittees that occur throughout the budget cycle, are not yet announced because we just had a big election and we're going to have leadership changes in each chamber. We don't know yet. We have some good guesses, but we don't know for sure who will be on all of the finance committees and the various subcommittees. You might have testified in a budget in the past to a subcommittee, perhaps the Health and Human Services Subcommittee or an Education Subcommittee or a Health Subcommittee of the Finance Committee. I'll note that the incoming leaders and chairs can kind of restructure those subcommittees. So it's really important to kind of keep note what the structure looks like each budget cycle, note who the chairs are of both full finance and the new subcommittees that form in January, and be sure to really understand where our issues will come before you. So that's something that our team will do our best to alert folks on in a really timely fashion. Some of you have been calling into our morning meetings, which I'll touch on shortly, but that'll be a weekly way that we're really keyed into to try to help announce when there are opportunities to engage. We'll also include things in our newsletter and in our advisory council e-blasts as well. I'll note that the House, so the governor's version of the budget will come out most likely February 3rd. And then his version of the bill will come out in the House. The House will make their changes to it. They'll likely have their hearings between February and April. The agencies, the Legislative Service Commission, and then all of the state agencies will come in and testify first, as well as the Office of Budget and Management. And then we'll move into organizations around the state doing advocacy and finally public testimony. So those committee notices come out weekly. We do our best to keep track of them and alert folks when there are opportunities for that public testimony. They will move the bill over to the Senate. The Senate hopes in April. I have April to May here. There's a chance Senate hearings could go through the beginning of June as well. But that's yet another chance to come in and testify as to how the Senate has changed or not, or should the House's version of the bill on a number of line items. Finally, conference committee will take place in the second half of June, and that is comprised of both House and Senate members from both parties doing their final side-by-side of all three versions, Governor, House, and Senate, of the budget, and having all of the leaders from Governor's office, the House, and the Senate come together and choose and negotiate where they land on each line item. I'll also note testimony is often time limited, especially when we have public testimony and tons of witnesses, sometimes hundreds of witnesses across a couple days, hearings going late into the night. I've seen various chairs limit testimony to 2 or 3 minutes sometimes, depending on the number of witnesses that are on the docket. They usually will post the order on the door, printed out, and sometimes you can work with the chair's office to learn a guesstimate of when you'll be testifying. I think it's often, ideal if you can be here in person in Columbus, that in that case, if there are questions from legislators, then you're able to respond in real time. But it is always an opportunity to submit written. our team is always happy to help with either templating or looking at something or doing a run through if you're interested in doing testimony this budget cycle. Now I am going to introduce Melissa Harris, who is our policy associate, very, very closely working with our families and our Family Action Network. Melissa will talk to you a little bit more about how we can best engage families. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you for that. The Family Action Network empowers parents and caregivers to actively participate in the policymaking process, ensuring that their lived experiences and insights are reflected in decisions that affect their families. By fostering a diverse and inclusive coalition, Groundwork Ohio amplifies the voices of those who have historically been excluded, working to create a system where families have a genuine influence in shaping Ohio's early childhood policies and practices. Our families can engage with us through many different ways, such as webinars, events, and advocating. And currently, I am working on recruiting families to join our Family Action Network, as well as working with family-facing organizations such as our child care resource and referral agencies to attend family engagement events so I can get to know families around Ohio. For the families, I have planned out a year of Family Action Network monthly calls. On these calls, families will be engaged in 10 to 15 minutes of learning and 45 minutes of discussion. I look forward to leading our families to advocacy. Thank you. And now we're going to go on to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I'll just touch really briefly a kind of quick recap on our opportunities for engagement. As you've heard from Melissa, you've heard from Vanessa, we have some opportunities that are really specific to different folks that we work with. And we have lots of other opportunities that are general. So we really want to do the best we can to find a way that is easiest for you to get in touch with our team. So a few of the items we've covered already are the action alerts that Sarah did an overview of. We just shared a little bit more about testimony. I mentioned briefly the morning meeting. I'll go ahead and share a slide. We have now had 3 of these events, and we are going to continue hosting them weekly from now through the state budget cycle going into July. We've had some really great presentations from Department of Children and Youth. We have had a presentation from the Ohio Association of Food Banks. Next week, we're going to have a presentation from a federal lobbyist, Liz Powell of G2G Consulting, to kind of give us a little bit of a post-election analysis. And we are always looking for ideas. So if there's something that you would like to see, please let us know. We're looking forward to inviting legislators to the meeting as well, especially as we're entering budget season. And we do our best to keep these to 30 minutes instead of a webinar format. They're a meeting and they're quite informal. So sometimes we have slides, sometimes we chat. Tomorrow morning, our team is going to be leading a little bit more of an interactive engagement workshop opportunity. So you can hop on and we're actually going to go through submitting an action alert together in real time. And that way you can troubleshoot if you have any problems with one of our team members. And finally, save the date. We are so excited. We have the State House reserved for March 12th, 2025. It will be the heat of the budget cycle, and we are just so thrilled that we're going to be able to bring together hundreds of you and help connect you with lots of legislators and have a really, really powerful State House Day. So registration will open in the new year, but please mark your calendars now for March 12th. And before I pass things back over to Lynn, I just wanted to share a quick reminder. If you aren't already following Groundwork Ohio on social media, you can find us on any platform at Groundwork Ohio. We are quite active. We're always sharing all sorts of news, resources, and all sorts of updates related to young children and families. So really would love to engage with you there. And really, thank you. We have a little bit of time left. And would be happy to answer questions about our roadshow report and or our policy agenda or any of the opportunities for engagement that we shared today. I should have given a warning to put some more questions in the chat when I knew this was coming closer, but I was just so excited about engagement because that's my favorite part of this work. Lynn, anything that you wanted to share that we missed?
I don't think so. There was a couple questions in the chat that we responded to, but for I think the benefit of the full group today, well, first of all, A reminder, I see a question, will this be recorded and a copy be available? Yes, you'll get the recording later today. And also our team can re-input into the chat a copy of the report. I think if you've taken anything, please take a few minutes today to look through the report, particularly the policy agenda. We want to make sure that you see yourselves in it. You should, because you have been engaged in this process throughout the calendar year. And we need you to be engaged moving forward, because we're all really in this together, and it's going to require each and every one of us to act. I often say, and have said in communities, is that our promise to you is that we're going to show up every day. We'll be at the State House. These policymakers expect to hear from us. In fact, they reach out to us in advance, oftentimes of making decisions or proposing policies on young children, which is a great responsibility that we carry, and we do so with kind of the utmost integrity to what we learn across the state. And at the same time, we also need you to make the promise that you'll be in this with us. We're trying to make it as easy for you as possible, because most of you aren't professional advocates as your day job. You're caring for children in your communities, you're leading community work, but we want to really bring and strengthen that pipeline from your work to the decisions that are made at the State House, so that your work can be successful and more young children and families can be prepared. A couple more questions. There was a question around the child care goal of 200%, increasing eligibility to 200% of the federal poverty level. And the question was, are you going to also advocate to maintain the percentage for the second tier of eligibility? So right now, if a family becomes eligible, they aren't determined ineligible as long as they continue to have a qualifying work event up until the time that they reach the 300% of poverty. The challenge, so the answer to that question is yes, we want to be additive. We don't want to take away access at all. The challenge with that upper tier of eligibility is that many families who are coming in at below 145% of the federal poverty level, that the current initial eligibility, never really make it up to 300% before coming off. They may find a new job that's at a higher wage, but they're not entering a very low wage job and kind of over time making more wage. So we see less families benefiting from that upper echelon. And that's in part because we have one of the lowest initial eligibilities in the country at 145% of the federal poverty level. So our work is to increase that, to serve more low-income families. But you should assume that within our policy agenda, they're all additive. They're building on to the current policies that exist, not trading one out for another. So we're happy to answer any other policy questions like that as well.
Linnea and I shared briefly, we had another question around when folks will be alerted around testimony. So I mentioned again that will come out weekly during our morning meeting calls, but we'll also put out e-blasts in our weekly newsletter on Friday mornings, as well as with our advisory council groups as well around policies that are specific to those stakeholders. We do have another question about the focus of Advocacy Day, and I think it's fair to say that our Advocacy Day will focus largely on that public policy agenda that Lynn previewed earlier this morning, and that we'll be sharing that's in the Roadshow report. We'll have more specific fact sheets related to each of the kind of big picture bullet points in that public policy agenda as well on that day, March 12th, which I'll just keep pitching again. We have one more question. Oh, sorry, Lynn, go ahead.
And if I can just add on to that, for folks who haven't experienced an Advocacy Day before, typically our advocacy starts, and we'll get details to you in the coming weeks and months, but we start in the morning. We engage with you, make sure that you're prepared, have the materials that you need, feeling aligned with where we are in terms of where the budget process is at. We typically have a wonderful keynote speaker to help really engage us, build our confidence, and inspire us to go then spend the afternoon doing legislative meetings so that you can meet with both your senator and your representative. So an opportunity to meet with both members in each of the chambers that represent you, either where you live or work. We often pair together folks from your local community to go off to those offices, and we wind up accomplishing an incredible number of visits throughout the day. Again, we provide you with materials. We'll have an advocacy training in February to help prepare you and make you feel more comfortable with the details of that day. And we'll also then follow up with you to see how your meetings went, make sure you sent a thank you note. So we really help guide you through that process if you haven't been part of that process yet. But there should be no surprises about what the potential of our priorities are, because we've shared those already. What we will have the benefit of doing on March 12th that we don't have the benefit of doing now is knowing what is in the governor's executive budget. So we'll have the opportunity again to elevate where the governor's budget and our priorities align so that we can amplify those to ensure that they're supported through the legislative process. And then we can identify some barriers where maybe our expectations have come up short, or we're hearing some other possible legislative threats where the legislature may not have the same priority as the governor that or our policy agenda that we really want to fill in for. The most important part, however, is that you come prepared to share your work, your experience. So you don't need any other expertise except knowing your personal experience. And we really help carry you through the rest of that day.
Thanks, Leanne. We have one more question in the Q&A that's about the changes coming down the road at the federal level and their impact on childcare. I think that we, like many folks in the advocacy space, are sort of waiting with bated breath to see who all of the cabinet and agency directors are that are being appointed. I know I'm getting those New York Times alerts every couple minutes, it feels like sometimes, to see who the new officials will be at the federal level. And in fact, some of them are even coming from Ohio. So I hate to say that we're not 100% sure yet, but I think it would be hard to guess. I don't know if Lynn, you have additional specifics to add, but I think we're all sort of waiting to see how everything shakes out here in the next couple months before inauguration.
Sure. So I've been at Groundwork for 8 years. Our organization's been around for 20 years. And we have been successful regardless of who's leading at the state level in terms of the political party and at the federal level. And we've seen progress in both spaces, and our organization is positioned to make progress irregardless of who's at the helm, whether it's the president, the governor, legislative leadership. And so we're just taking in all the new information. We have a lot of strategic partners that help us get quick access to that information. In fact, on the federal side, we're on a weekly call that's helping connect early childhood advocates across the country to the most up-to-date information, so that there's also shared coalition across the nation where we have shared priorities, even though our states look really different. So I think that we will be prepared to, again, identify where there's an opportunity for you all to really lean in and make an impact as both state and federal policy changes are coming along. Obviously, we are interested in spending and appropriation bills near the end of the year and seeing what activity and development happens there. We know a lot of early childhood, or a majority of the early childhood programs, are funded through federal funds. So it beseeches us to make sure that we're in the know and are strong advocates there as well. But our focus will continue to be at the state level, but we'll keep you in the loop where we can have impact at the federal level as well.
Thanks so much, Lynn. I think we've got a couple minutes left. We'll keep on the line just in case anyone types anything else into that Q&A chat. Someone thanking Groundwork's Ohio's foot advocates, foot soldiers, directors, and everyone for fighting for Ohio's future and pushing back to make such a huge impact for our betterment. Thank you so much for that, and for being a part of our community. And if we don't have additional questions, will there be coaching time? I'm not sure if that's specific to the advocacy work. We will definitely have, as Lynn mentioned, we'll have a virtual training in advance of our advocacy day, where our team will give you a really great kind of gritty on the ground look at what that day will look like, and what to pack and what to wear and what to bring, and how to set yourself up best for success in a meeting with your state rep or state legislator, state senator. And thanks so much for that for that question. Great question. And if
And
there's
bef-
additional coaching that we could be helpful with, feel free to email any of us.
Yeah, your feedback can really guide the training that we provide, especially in those morning meeting segments. So if you're feeling insecure and not in the know on something, please let us help you and feel free to reach out to one of our team members. We're happy to help you increase your advocacy skills. And there's other more formal opportunities to do that, like through our early childhood fellowship as well. So we're here to support you. I love the thanks, Queen. Thanks for filling our cup this morning. We're really excited to do this work alongside you. We feel really confident about our policy agenda, about the level of engagement we've had, and the growing audience in our early childhood movement. So I'm excited to build this next chapter together. We know it's not going to be easy. We need all of us playing a role, and we will be your partner in doing so. We look forward to working together over this next year. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.